as a bookish, introverted reader and writer, there's no audience that I would hold in higher regard than a room full of librarians. And when I was about 6, I grew up in northern New Jersey. My parents would drop me off at the library once a week for several hours. And the librarians came to know me fairly quickly as a very serious reader and a probably unusually serious child with the soul of a 45-year-old. And so they waived the book limit for me. Like normally you could take out 10 books at a time. They told me I could take out as many as I wanted. So I brought a duffel bag to the library every week and filled the duffel bag with books. And as that would suggest, I read indiscriminately and widely. I didn't even know there were genres. So I consider that period of reading in my life to be the purest deep dive into reading of my existence. I had really strong opinions that nobody was interested in hearing, like that Trixie Belden is way better than Nancy Drew. That's right, she is. And I read all of the King Arthur myths. I read scary Lois Duncan thrillers, even though I now can't read anything even remotely scary, despite the fact that I just read a book about a plane crash. And I read all of Zane Grey and Louis L'Amour's Westerns. And one of the great pleasures that I found in writing books is that you can put invisible markers from your own life in the novels, be it a person, a place, or a moment. And one of the nice ways that I was able to mark my time at the Ramsey Public Library in my new book, Dear Edward, was that one of the characters has an entire bookcase that's filled with only the novels of Zane Grey and Louis L'Amour. I'm particularly grateful for that voracious, wide reading period, for like the ocean of books that I consumed, because I read so differently now. My reading now is as much about my writing as it is about reading. And when I teach fiction writing, I talk to my students about paying attention to their obsessions, to reaching for that book that speaks to them and only them. I tell them to imagine that we each have a magnet board inside of us, like a rectangular magnet board that fills your torso, and it's specifically calibrated to you. It's different than your husband or your best friend or even your twin. So what pulls to your magnet board is really important to pay attention to as a writer or artist. What sticks to your board may not pay attention at the time, but over a lifetime of paying attention, certain themes will emerge, which can be helpful for you to go deeper into your own work. And I'm on my 3rd novel, and I've only recently realized that they're all about how to live a meaningful life. So it's important that we pay attention. Actually, the writer and artist Amy Krauss Rosenthal has a piece of art that says, "Pay attention to what you pay attention to." So I worked on Dear Edward for 8 years. I'm very slow. And its genesis was an obsession. I found myself obsessed with a news story. In 2010, there was a plane crash, and it was a huge story at the time, but almost no one remembers it now. There was a plane that was flying from South Africa to London, but it crashed in Libya. And everyone on the plane died except for one 9-year-old boy named Ruben Van Nassau. And when they found him, his whole seat seemed to have ejected from the plane, basically. They speculate it's because of where it was in relation to the fuselage. So they found him a half-mile away from the debris, still buckled in. And he had a punctured lung and a badly broken leg, but he was otherwise fine. And everyone else on the flight, including his parents and his brother, died immediately. His aunt and uncle came from Holland and did an amazing job of protecting his privacy, really from the first minute. But in 2010, social media had really sort of crested for the first time. Everyone you knew was on Facebook, including your mother. And so there was like a 360-degree view of this event that we hadn't had before. There were young girls that created pages on Facebook dedicated to Ruben, where they wrote about how sad they were for him and how cute he was. There were aviation geeks who were speculating immediately online about why they thought the plane had crashed. There were psychologists talking about survivor guilt. There was a hospital worker who was at the hospital where Ruben was, who reported that the president of Libya had called Ruben in the hospital to wish him well. So it was really, it was no longer just newscasters and journalists that we were getting our news from. We were getting it from the person next to you. One of the things that I tell my students about paying attention to your obsessions is that a sign that an obsession probably does feed into your work and your themes is that it makes you uncomfortable. Like maybe you find yourself obsessed with that divorce going on down the street and you're peppering your friends for all the gossip. and that feels uncomfortable, like you should not be gossiping. And that discomfort is what I felt in relation to this story. It seemed incredibly morbid and sad to be trolling the internet like I was, looking for any bit of information about this horrible thing that had happened to this little boy. But that's what told me that I had to write about it. I needed to write my way into understanding the piece of it that fascinated me the most, which was, how could this boy go on? Like, how can you walk away from that wreckage, from the loss of your family, and not only survive, but live your life? So in my novel, my boy's name is Edward, and he's 12 years old. And my flight is from Newark Airport to LAX in Los Angeles. And one of the few things that I knew when I started was that I wanted the storyline of the flight to have an equal weight to Edward's life after the crash. In part because I think if something that absolutely devastating happened to you, it would be a weight that you would have to carry for the rest of your life. It wouldn't be something that you would be able to set down. It would be a matter of learning to bear that weight. So the two storylines alternate in the novel. In the first chapter, it's Edward and his brother Jordan and their parents boarding the plane. And with them, there's a titan of industry who has cancer. There's a soldier on his way back from Afghanistan. There's a free-spirited woman who believes in reincarnation and is running away from her husband. There's a Wall Street dude. There's a 25-year-old woman who's about to find out on the plane that she's pregnant. And the plane takes off, and then the second chapter is Edward waking up in the hospital after the crash, and his aunt and uncle are beside him. And so his storyline follows him as he walks into this sudden fame that surrounds him, where there's weird women like me reading about him on the internet, and the randomness of his survival and the loss of his family. When I started the novel, my sons were 1 and 3 years old. So they were both toddlers, and I always describe toddlers as like half-drunk bear cubs. They're ridiculous, they're adorable, they make no sense. One of them will be like sobbing over a grape, and the other one will have a bucket on his head. There's not a lot you can say about your children at that age that's definitive. You can't say, oh, I think he's going to be a mathematician, or I think he has a very strong moral code. So basically the only thing that I knew about them at that age was that they were deeply in love with each other from the moment they met. It was not something my husband or I expected or I anticipated or even thought was a thing. I have siblings and we like each other fine, but we also beat each other up a fair amount, and my sister would steal my underwear before she went to summer camp every year. But my sons are they seem to be connected by a million invisible threads. And I wrote their devotion into the book because I realized as I sat with Edward for 8 years that the biggest loss for him was actually his brother. It transcended even the loss of his parents. We were meant to grow away from our parents to a certain extent. We go to college, we grow up, we have our own lives, but our siblings are our peers. And when Edward does go to live with his aunt and uncle in New Jersey, he's immediately drawn to the girl who lives next door, who's his age, and he actually asks to sleep on her floor because he physically needs to be by another child. He misses his brother so much. In closing, I wanted to say that I know that Dear Edward sounds very sad, and it is, but it also isn't, I promise. It's not about a plane crash. It's about figuring out how to make a meaningful life in the face of a devastating loss. Edward's post-crash life is filled with people reaching out to help him. There's the badass girl who lives next door named Shay. There's a school principal who insists that he come to his office once a week to water his ferns. There's his aunt who sits with him and watches General Hospital every afternoon, and his uncle who tries to do everything that he can think of to make Edward feel better. I wanted to write a novel about kind people maneuvering a terrible situation. I wanted to create a world that was stitched together with kindness and love, and it ended up being a world that I was sorry to leave when my role in the story was finished. Thank you.
Okay, so I always enjoy hearing from the author, and if we can't have her live, it's the next best thing is a video. So I'm really glad we were able to do that, and I think it sets a good a good context for the discussion. So please, if you do want to speak, raise your hand electronically. I will start, and then we will call on people in the order in which you raise your hands. I liked the book. I liked it a lot. I think it was very thought-provoking and raised a lot of issues that I will be thinking about for a long time, and that we all think about. How do you survive trauma? How do you survive grief? How do we move forward with our lives? I think the psychiatrist who said to him at some point, it's in your bones. It's not like you move on without it. You take it with you. But you learn to live with it and grow from it. And I thought it was very real and very believable. And for all of us who have experienced grief and trauma in our lives, it's very true. It's very true. You don't move on. You don't forget. You don't leave it behind. You take it with you in your bones. And I thought it was very well done. I also really liked the parallel narratives that she spoke about, each chapter alternating between the present. You know right from the beginning that the plane crashed. So there's no sort of suspense about that. But somehow she created some suspense by going back and forth. You want to know how it happened, and you get to know the people on the plane. It reminded me a little bit of the book we read recently, One Amazing Thing, where everybody's got a story and you get to know the stories of all of these people. And I think a lot of times when we hear about plane crashes or other tragedies, the people don't have faces. They're just numbers. 185 people died on a plane crash. You don't know anything about them. Here she made them all people that we got to know. They were all people whose lives were interrupted prematurely, except for the old man who died on the plane. I thought that was an interesting thing that she inserted there, sort of the juxtaposition of a timely death and untimely death. But whether it's timely or untimely, we all have unfinished business, and we're all on a journey to somewhere, to the next step. Everybody on that plane was going somewhere for a reason, to finish some business, to move on with their lives, whatever. And so whether it's timely or untimely, we're never finished, we're never ready. And I got that from that juxtaposition there. And I think the other aspect of it that was very interesting was this business of survivor guilt. What's it like to be the sole survivor of something like that? Why me? And what is my responsibility? And the very heavy responsibility that was put on him by all of those people who wrote letters, basically telling him what they needed from him to do for them. What a terrible burden. But the way he handled it, I thought was quite interesting, and the issue of the money. So I want to talk about all those things. I see a couple of people have their hands up, so I'm going to call on you. I'm going to let Leslie call on you because she's good at that. And all right, so go ahead, Leslie.
Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to go to Dina. Go ahead, Dina.
I loved the book, and stupidly, when I was going through New York, I was reading the book on the plane, and I said, I think I should close the book. But my brother, in 1970, was coming home from backpacking in Europe, and he was hijacked on a plane leaving Amsterdam en route to JFK. And my family was in the middle of a lot of loss. My dad had just passed away. My mother was ill, and he was right in the middle. And we really never addressed the trauma that he went through. And it's been a feeling in my heart for many years that we neglected to deal with him, because I can't imagine there was a gun pointed at every passenger asking what they were. They were looking for Jewish passengers. My maiden name was Irwin, so it was not an ethnic name. And I have a tape when the plane landed in Cairo to refill, and then it went to Lebanon, or Libya, I forget. Anyway, as soon as everybody was off the plane blew up. So he came home he had no shoes and no luggage. And he went to a Pan Am, picked them all up and brought them to Rome. And he was interviewed there. But it was, I can't even imagine. And when I read this book, my heart was hurting so very desperately of what his trauma might have been like. So it related to me. I thought the book was just spectacular. And that's my take.
Thank you.
Thank you for selecting it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roz? Hold on.
There,
Good.
okay,
Go ahead,
okay.
Ross.
I'm unmuted. Okay, thanks. I really enjoyed the book also. And the part that really made me cry like a maniac was when the movers went through all the stuff and found his stuffed elephant and sent it to him in the hospital. That was so amazing. And what I want to know, I forgot to write down the seat number. Does anybody remember? Was he in 31A? Does anybody remember
31E,
that?
I think.
Yeah, because I'd like to go online and look up this plane crash that she talked about from 2010 and see what seat this boy Ruben was in. Because I think I'm going to book that seat forever. If it's also 31A.
I think it's 31E because it's a window seat.
Okay, all right,
That's
thank
the
you.
window. Yeah. Hold on. We're going to go now to Halprin, but you need to unmute yourself, Halprin.
Yes,
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I was very impressed with how the author slowly brought him back to some kind of normalcy. She didn't wrap it up in a bow nicely, easily. As a school psychologist and working with kids for many years, I was very impressed in how she did that.
I agree, and I think that that was one of the important themes of the book, in that, you know, anybody who's survived any difficulty in their life, or all of us, can think of somebody who was really there for you, a teacher, a school psychologist, the principal in this case. That simple act of having him coming in and watering the ferns was so meaningful. Why is it important to be watering ferns? Taking care of something and nurturing something is so healing. There's lots of research that gardening is actually very good for depression, but not just gardening, nurturing, healing, growing, anything. And I thought that was so important. Not just the principal, but there were other important. The aunt and uncle played such an important role, and Shay and her mother. And without people, one doesn't move forward. Without this kind of support, it's impossible. So I thought that was well portrayed.
And I love the ending and how the money was dispersed.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing other people's feelings about the ending. It really was about sort of the healing had to come for him through altruism. He had plenty for himself. He didn't need it, and he gave it away. So yeah.
Thank you, Linda.
I was so sad reading this book that I was thrilled, Stephanie, that you had the author speak, because I appreciated her pointing out that her point was to show all the kindness of all the people towards him. And I pretty much missed that because I felt I was just so sad. That's why I'm on this book club right now, because I want to hear, I heard the book was so great and I want to hear what people liked so much about it. And because, I don't know, it was so sad to me.
It is so sad, but I think that it really is about his survival, and his.
Yeah, but he wasn't, did you feel, I didn't feel like he was, I didn't feel he was happy that he was.
Felt like he was okay. I left the book feeling like he was okay. And he had some good, solid relationships in his life with Shay and with the aunt and uncle. That relationship evolved from him arriving there feeling like, well, they have to do this. In fact, he actually asks them at one point, am I here because you legally have to take care of me? And it develops into a real family relationship. But I thought it was very well portrayed how awkward that was for him when he arrived there. He didn't even want to sleep in that house. He wanted to sleep in Shay's house. But it evolved into a relationship. And I remember feeling at first like upset that the uncle had hidden those letters from him, and then understanding that he had really protected him from a terribly heavy burden that those letters would have put on a young boy. And they were still a heavy burden, but he had a couple of years to kind of heal a little bit before he was confronted by all that pressure. I was overwhelmed by what those people expected of this young boy. Yeah. My thoughts, yeah. But thanks, Linda.
Susan?
Hi, I was kind of taken with his relationship with Shay and how important that was. He felt, he knew how good his relatives, his aunt and uncle was, how important they were and what they were doing. But he kind of felt, he knew that his aunt had had a miscarriage and how they wanted the room to be fixed up for the baby, and yet that room was supposed to be for him, but he couldn't sleep there. When he went to Shay, he felt there weren't any expectations. He didn't have to act a certain way. And she was like a misfit in the school. And he felt that he didn't belong either. So they had this special connection, and he felt comfortable there. And it was so meaningful to him. She was such a help. And neither of them were considered, in quotes, normal. So that, I think that was a big part of the book. That's what I have to say right now.
Thank you, Susan.
Um,
Joan?
Yeah, and then when you're done with Joan, I see that Esther Levine is pointing her finger, ready to speak. So we'll go to Esther after Joan.
The character that I was very impressed with was Shay's mother. I found that Shay's mother was so tolerant of the situation. I mean, can you imagine having this next door neighbor sleeping on your daughter's floor for a long time? I know she set limits eventually, but I felt she was so wonderful and inclusive, like she just got it. And I don't think a lot of, that was a bit when I read that, I said, that's amazing. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Esther, go ahead.
Esther, you have to unmute yourself first.
She's unmuted.
Okay.
I'm unmuted.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Again, it's been several months since I read the book, but I loved hearing the author speak. And Stephanie, you've made such wonderful comments, all of you. And I certainly I remember just wanting to keep reading the book and not feeling, even though I get really emotional, I didn't feel sad by it. I was really, I found what you said, Stephanie, about, moving forward, and it was just a wonderful story about him. And I guess because recently I've been reading many, many books, or trying to search for some special books for a festival. And I've read a lot of Holocaust books, and some with hidden children and just people survivors who moved past. And I know it seems way off, but in a way, you put that, as I listened to her, you put that experience in the corner and you move forward with your life and create a new life for yourself. And so, yes, they all had such devastating things happen to them, and yet found kindness through people, different experiences you've seen people make, and then go on and have meaningful lives. And so that just kind of resonated with me, just because that's where I'm at right now. But I thought it was a wonderful story, well-written book. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it just came to my mind, by the way, about this is just a random thought, but the family dynamics of Edward's family were so interesting. And I think the way she put the mother in first class writing while the rest of the family was in coach, separated, it said so much about the family, that the symbolism of that, the mother sitting separately, and her resentment about, she was the breadwinner primarily, and the father was a mathematician who hadn't quite made it, Bruce. Her resentment about having to support, they were moving to California so she could get more writing jobs. Anyway, I just thought that just the physical separation of them that way in the plane. And what I kept thinking about was, what was the difference in sitting in first, made zeros a difference. Everybody died. It didn't matter if you were in first class or in coach. Everybody died, except for Edward. So that reminded me of, the Titanic and steerage. And anyway, go on, Leslie.
Okay, we're going now to Maureen.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this book so much. I thought that the character development that the author gave us was a gift. It really was. And I also appreciated so much the kindness that she demonstrated, the people who surrounded this very vulnerable young boy, which I thought was terrific. And Stephanie, I too want to thank you for bringing the author to life. I found her absolutely fascinating and added a great dimension to this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy.
Yes, I thought it was a wonderful book. And I also thank you, Stephanie, for bringing the author on video. It just really knit the book together for me from the beginning to end, adding the kind people, and which I thought. But if she didn't explain the personalities of many of the people on the plane that passed away, and then all the letters coming in, I just think that his uncle did a wonderful job in holding the letters back for 2 years. Because as you said, Steffi, I think that it would have been too much for him to grasp onto if he showed him in the beginning. And he made a life, Edward, and out of all of those letters and the money he received and giving the money to the survivors that had something to do with that loved the people on the plane. I just thought it was wonderful. And the ending was very beautiful. It was very beautiful that he and Shay went to see the plane, went to see the area of the plane, and they will be together forever. I was just very happy. It was a beautiful opening, middle, and end. Wonderful author. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Yvette?
Thank you. I like the book very much. A hallmark for me is good character development. And this was one of the best books doing that. I loved the way she built up the other passengers. I had a little trouble towards the end when she described the crash, how the plane got out of automatic pilot because of the co-pilot. And the co-pilot was making all of these mistakes and the pilot was just sitting there. It didn't make sense to me at all. But whatever, the book was absolutely wonderful. He married Shay in the end, not such a surprise, small mention. But with character development, that was a relationship development too. And there were some periods where they were not as close. It was very realistic and it was wonderful. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, she did a lot of research, obviously, into aerodynamics and plane crashes and whatever. And I don't know if these were the specific circumstances of that plane crash that triggered her needing to write this book, but certainly pilot error happens, you know, and it's very, I think that's part of what's so scary about it is our lives are in the hands of people who are humans who make mistakes. So not that I want to scare anybody out of flying, but right now viruses have me more scared than plane crashes. I'm not flying anywhere. I actually have never been afraid of flying, but when you think about it, you know, we're not. I fly without being afraid of flying because I don't think about it. If you think about the miracle of this thing getting off the ground and somehow staying in the air, it's impossible that this should go well as often as it does, you know? So I think that's, but isn't that how we live a lot, is just not thinking about how things work, or, you know, because I don't know what that noise is.
I know, everybody's on mute, so I don't know.
I'm not sure what it is. All right. I'll put myself in a minute when I'm not speaking, but you know, I think we put a lot of blind faith in technology to take care of us, or humans that know what they're doing, and the truth is it's pretty painful.
Okay, Marjorie?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I happen to agree with just about what everybody has said. I really enjoyed reading the book. It was a very good read. I always know when I like a book, when I can't wait to put it, you know, bring it up, and I almost don't want to put it down. I just want to, you know, keep reading. I think the character portrayals were terrific. And, you know, and that's why when the first speaker went on, when she said, you know, she found it incredibly sad, normally that's me. If I start a book and I start to tear up, or I just dreading how it's going to end, I almost cannot get through it. I just don't like books like that. And this could have, you know, gone that way, but I don't think it gone that way at all, really. I mean, obviously the crash wasn't yay, there's a crash and the loss of it. I mean, there's no doubt about that. You knew that was the premise of the book, but the development of it, the way from the beginning to end, how it ends up, and the characters in between, and even the stories. I mean, she could have had more stories about the characters, I mean, personnel on the plane, and made the book actually very sad. I mean, even the more you read about those characters and then the loss of their life and where they were, she could have, not that I wanted to, she could have dwelled on that to make the tone of the book, you know, heavier even, which I don't feel she did. And I just really, I have to say, I thought it was a special book. And I also thank you, Stephanie, for showing the video, because I really did enjoy the author very much. And I'm amazed that it took her 8 years to write the book. I thought she was going to say she wrote it in 8 months, but she said 8 years. That's something. I mean, it didn't, not putting down the book, but I wouldn't think, you know, when you think of something that takes 8 years, I think about this big tome of a book that's like 500 pages. So she created something special. And thank you. It's good.
Thank you, Marjorie. Alice?
Good morning. I agreed with what everybody has said, so I will not repeat. Marjorie, she had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old when she began, so think of trying to do the research and write a book like that. And I enjoyed her so much. You know, I didn't see Dear Evan Hansen, and I read this book a long time ago, and when I've been thinking about it and read like a little recap, I thought of Edward as Dear Evan Hansen, though the event really happened to him, but he was burdened with all this, notoriety in a way, because he was a survivor. And if you think about everybody else on the plane, so many of them had tragedies happen to them. They were not happy, and their lives ended. And then Edward was left with letters from all the people who were related to them, and her descriptions were unbelievable. I don't know why I keep thinking of the lady with the bells on her skirt.
Florida.
Thank you. It was a great read. I loved it.
Thanks.
Thanks, Alice. Lynn?
Hi, everybody. I was really impressed with the relativity of this book of today. I think the author mentioned the fact of social media and what it did for this book. 20 years ago, that young Edward would never have been known as the most famous boy in America or the most famous author in America. That was really very interesting to me, the effect of social media and what it did to him, the good and the bad. And there was another point in the book that they were at the hearing that really grabbed me, and I wrote it down. It said, at the hearing, a man yelled out, "Nobody will care about this kid if he was Black." And the book was published about a year ago, I think. So what an interesting remark for her to make, I thought, because it's so relevant today. And then I saw somebody ask, why did she make the family Jewish? And I really can't figure out why she did, unless she may be Jewish. To me, she has an Italian last name, but she may be Jewish. The fact of rituals, but the family was not particularly Orthodox. They weren't kosher, if I remember correctly. So that, if anybody has any thoughts, why were they Jewish? Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't have any thoughts about that, but I was thinking about the fact that people attribute all kinds of amazing things to people that they know nothing about. So, when he survived this thing, people attributed magical powers to him, and even Shay compared him to Harry Potter, and he resented that. It made him angry. I'm not special because I survived a crash. I'm just me, and I'm living with a tragedy. But I think that was very interesting. But I have no idea why the family was Jewish. I have no thoughts about that. The family.
Beth Marks, but Beth, you need to unmute yourself, please. Beth?
Beth, are you there? Why don't you go on and we'll come
Okay,
back.
we're going to go back now to go to Dina. Go ahead, Dina.
Oh, I was going to talk about the ending. I was so, it's so, they always say that when you're going to meet somebody, you want it to be your best friend when you get married. And they had gone through so much together. And I felt so happy that they wound up spending time together, because I think the last lines were, and she was going to be the mother of his children. And so the book ended on such a positive and upbeat note. And so that made me very happy to close the book and feel kind of like he really survived. He made this wonderful friend who helped him through all the trauma, and eventually they came together. And I thought that was a spectacular ending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Beth's available.
Beth, go ahead. Beth?
Okay, Beth is unmuted. All right, let's move on.
Okay, Nancy, unmute yourself, please. Go ahead.
Okay. To answer what Dina said, I think that Edward helped Shay almost as much as she helped him. That's why I believe Shay's mother was very happy that she knew the family. She knew his aunt and uncle very well, liked them very much. Thank you. And I think she knew that her daughter was a little bit strange and not popular. And she saw this blossoming boy and her daughter maybe getting a little bit more normal. And I think she really he helped Shay almost as much as she helped him. She definitely saved his life, but he helped her a lot too. I think that's why she stuck with him throughout everything.
Thank you, Nancy. Jeanette.
Yeah, I just have a funny sort of a question that troubled me a little bit, and I love the book. In the book, in the beginning, when we go back to his life, Edward and Jordan were so incredibly close. So I was really puzzled why Jordan didn't say anything about his girlfriend, Mehinda, about that relationship. It was so special to him and to her, and he didn't share it with Edward. So I'm wondering what everybody thinks.
I hadn't really thought about it, but maybe it speaks to the fact that sometimes there are things in families that even between very close people, they don't share. Maybe he was concerned that the family wouldn't be accepting of the relationship. Maybe he was uncertain about it himself. I don't know. I'd like to hear what other people have to say.
I think maybe his brother was too young. They were, I believe, 3 years apart. And I think Jordan, you could tell that Jordan, they loved each other so much. And I just think that Jordan thought his brother was too young to hear about a kiss and a love and wouldn't understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, Sally just wrote in the chat, I think it's a teenage thing. I think that's true.
Okay, it wasn't a big deal, but it just, I was thinking of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Louise?
Hi, yes, I think it was a teenage thing. And I think it was new to him. His body was changing. The feelings were new. He may not have even known how to express it yet to his younger brother. He was still figuring it out. I think that's why he didn't tell him. That's it.
Okay. Barbara, unmute yourself, please.
I think a teenage thing or whatever, he was trying to become an individual and develop himself. That's why he did what he did at the airport.
Right.
And so he needed things to be his own. Everything else was shared up until then, and he needed a sense of self. And I think he was developing that in various things that he did. So he was the older brother. He was very good to the younger brother. He shared with his parents. He was close to his father. And yet he needed to do something for himself. And I loved the book. I thought it was excellent. And it also points up to me the importance of a friend and somebody your age, because you can't always relate to an adult. And
Right.
Especially since they were also in mourning. It was her sister that was killed. So she was in mourning too. So I think there was a limit to what she gave him and how much she could give. She was mourning a child she didn't have. She was mourning her sister's death. And I think he needed to get away, and it was wonderful that she was there. And I think it points up the importance of friendships and you know, people your age, and how important that socialization is. And sometimes we overlook that. And I think that's a very important part of growing up, if you can have it. He had at least, all you need is one good friend. And that's what he had, to be important to himself and to one other person that was thinking only of him. And it was a beautiful relationship.
Yeah. Cheryl wrote in the chat, did anyone feel the palm reader was reincarnated from the lady with the bells? That's Florida, the lady with the bells. She said she moved into somebody's body who had lived. So that was an interesting thought. I didn't think about it, but it's not the way my brain usually goes. But yeah, interesting thought.
I'm just going to check in with Beth again. Beth? Okay.
Okay.
So we're going to Yvette, back to Yvette. Unmute yourself, Yvette.
I did.
Good. Go ahead.
I want to go back to the relationship that Jordan had with Mahira. The relationship solely consisted of kissing. And at that point, it didn't sound as if they had ever even had a conversation. And I can remember being a young teenager, and there were some relationships like that. But I don't think that he had really enough of a relationship with her to share, because all they did was kiss. It was a lot of fun. And he thought about it a lot, but it really wasn't a relationship yet.
Somebody wrote in the chat that it was so special that maybe he didn't want to share it. It was so special to keep it, you know, keep something.
First love.
Alice commented, if I recall, they did not want to go to LA. They were leaving their lives behind, and it was over for them. Yeah, absolutely. They did not want to go to LA.
Joan?
Yes, I agree. What that has been said regarding Jordan's relationship, that he wanted to, you know, keep it special and it was new. But also, I just wanted to say something. I love this book so much that I've been, you know, reading other books since then, but this book just resonates with me. I mean, it was so terrific and engrossing. And, you know, someone, you know, I recommend this to a friend who said it was very sad, but it was also very, very beautiful. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Maureen?
I wanted to talk a little bit about Edward's aunt and uncle. They made so many critical decisions, especially in the beginning and moving on throughout his life, that were so right. You know, I don't remember whether they had any professional help directly for them, but I found it incredible that they instinctively knew what to do, what not to do, and how to protect him. And I found that absolutely incredible. They really were terrific with him, terrific.
Thank you. Nancy?
Yes, I believe that, Stephanie, what you said about Florida being reincarnated, she very much believed in that. And I couldn't understand when Edward went to the tarot card reader, and he was told that she stinks, that she's not a good reader. And yet she did know everything about this boy. She knew his real name and blah, blah, blah. And she straightened him out. And I think Florida was reincarnated into the reader. I did think that also when I was reading that. Possibly she was, because all of a sudden she's fantastic. She doesn't stink, you know, she was great.
I'm glad you mentioned the change of name. We didn't talk about that at all, but he's Eddie before the accident and Edward after the accident. And I think we all know from those of us who have taken classes about the Old Testament that it's a frequent motif that God changes your name when life-changing events, you know, Avram and Sarai become Abraham and Sarah. And there are other examples of it as well. And I think that's interesting that he took a new name after this life-changing moment. Beth, are you there by any chance? We're still trying to get you.
She's
I
not
think
on,
maybe Beth doesn't have a microphone and doesn't realize it.
she's not on camera for sure.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
All right, anyway, Beth, you and I can discuss that later. I thought one of my computers had a microphone that didn't, and that could be.
Okay, so Joan has a question.
Yep.
In the chat, if you want to go ahead and read it.
Oh, what's Joan's question? Joan, can we talk about Edward's psychiatrist? He told Edward's aunt and uncle that he might be at risk for suicide. Okay, Joan, did you want to speak about that?
Unmute yourself, Joan.
No, I just thought, first of all, I thought the psychiatrist was wonderful.
Mhm.
And I basically, I just threw that out. You know, I just thought, you know, I thought the aunt and uncle were wonderful to find somebody so wonderful for him. And that it was just a general question. It was just general thoughts.
I thought the psychiatrist was wonderful too, and I thought the process was realistic. You know, Edward arrives there and doesn't want to talk and doesn't think this is going to do him any good, and what's he need this for anyway, and typical of a teenager being sent to a therapist. But that relationship evolved, and I thought that the psychiatrist's patience with him was wonderful, and he really did help him.
Yes.
And I think that insight is about, you know, that it's with, that you're not just moving on from this. This is with you forever, was probably the most valuable thing that he gave him. You will survive this. You will live with this, but it will be with you forever. And you're changed. You're unalterably changed by it.
Yes.
Thank you. Susan?
I was just thinking of something that somebody brought up about psychiatrists, and the aunt and uncle knew what to do. If I was in that situation, I think I would need help in how to, you know, what to do with a child who is a survivor in this situation. I don't think I would know instinctively how to handle the situation. I'd like to know how other people feel about this. Do you all think you would know instinctively?
Oh, sorry, I accidentally muted you, Susan. I was trying to mute Beth. Please unmute yourself, Susan.
Susan, unmute yourself.
I'm sorry.
No, it's your fault. It was me. I did it by mistake. Sorry. Go on, Susan. We didn't hear your last sentence. Was there something else?
She's muted again.
Oh, all right. I don't know what, I didn't mute Susan. Susan, go ahead and unmute yourself. Oh boy. Okay, and that was the situation with Beth. There's no microphone on her computer, so we don't have to go back to Beth. Do you want to go to Dina?
What happened?
Now you're back, Susan.
Are you done?
No, I wanted to know how other people felt. Do you feel that you would know enough how to handle a situation if you had a child who was a survivor, moved into your house? I would feel I might need some guidance in what to do.
I would feel that too, and I guess it's not clear whether they had that or not, but it didn't. They certainly didn't draw any attention to it. And I think that somebody brought the point up here too that they were grieving, and perhaps there wasn't enough attention paid to their grief as well.
Dina?
I agree with Susan. I think I would have sought out help immediately, you know, because they were so anguished about not having a child and all these miscarriages that she goes through. And she was mourning her sister, and now she had a 12-year-old child all of a sudden to be responsible for. One of the things I thought about the psychiatrist, and I love the fact that he was so very honest with Edward. He said to him, it's in your bones. It's going to live with you forever. And I think he was just telling him that he had to learn how to deal with the situation and make his life the best it could be. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't make it easy. It wasn't, in fact, something that was now instilled in him. It was part of him, and it was never going to be gone. And I think when, you know, anyone who's gone through any kind of trauma, you know, time heals all wounds, but the wounds are still in there. It just becomes not as heavy when it's time starts letting it soften.
Yeah.
Phyllis?
I think they were just very lucky to have found a psychiatrist as good as the one they had. It doesn't always work out so well. You don't always find a psychiatrist that's that qualified, you know, and so I do feel they were fortunate in having found someone who was so understanding and so professional and who was able to really, really help them. I just think a lot of luck is involved.
Isn't that true with everything? A lot of luck is involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know,
Joan?
I agree with what's been said. I think anyone who has been in this kind of situation needs some kind of, needs some kind of counsel. But I thought somebody said something very interesting in the chat, that people rise to the occasion. I remember when my husband and I were doing our wills and we spoke to our, when we were much younger and our kids were under 18. And I said, have you had these situations, when parents, died when the children were young? And he said exactly what one woman said on chat, said, people rise to the occasion. And I truly believe that's probably what happens.
Thank you. Nancy, go ahead, unmute yourself.
I think that you were discussing the aunt and uncle, that they should have seen a psychiatrist themselves, but I do believe that they were so undulated with their own problems, losing baby after baby. I mean, I know somebody who that happened to, and just it would have been too much. I think it was wonderful of them to find this wonderful psychiatrist for Edward, and they just did keep an eye on him. The aunt did what she could do. I mean, she was on heavy sleeping pills, knocked her out for the night. It looked like their marriage was breaking up to me, her and her husband. He was sleeping in another room. And I think that they both, if they had gone to a psychiatrist, I don't think you would have had a great ending to the book if it was explained earlier in the book why the uncle kept all the letters secret from Edward. And he would have known, it wouldn't have been the same. I think, however, and Napolitano wrote it, I think it was just perfect. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you. Natalie, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to sort of go back to the beginning, to the author who said, I wanted to write about kind people in extraordinary circumstances. And I'm always surprised by, in this book club, where people say there was no one to like in this book. In this book, there was everyone to like. She made everyone nice and kind. And so he began to live in another kind of bubble. And I think it would have been hard for him to escape it. The other thing I want to say is everybody knew everything before social media. Judy Blume spoke here, I think, at the JCC, and she wrote a novel about about a year in Newark where there were 3 plane crashes. So I tell you that I was a child when they happened, and they, it stayed with me forever. And everybody knew about it. I wouldn't get on an airplane. We went from New Jersey to Ohio to see relatives, and we had to drive because I wouldn't get on the airplane. And everybody, when we got to Ohio, everybody knew about 3 plane crashes at one time. It was in a very short period of time. It was an exceptional thing, and you didn't need social media to tell you about it. That's all.
Thank you. We don't have any more raised hands right now, Stephanie.
I mute myself periodically because there's a lot of activity going on behind me with dogs. I apologize for that. You know, this is a very interesting thing that's going on with all these Zooms. You know, when you watch the news, everybody's got dogs barking and phones ringing, and you're in everybody's living room all of a sudden. So it's a whole new world, but thank goodness we have it. Yeah, so if somebody has other comments, and I'm, by the way, just as happy to hear from people who maybe didn't like the book or had some criticisms of the book. So by all means, feel free to share. This is not a place where you have to like everything by any means.
I see somebody waving. Hold on. Elaine, unmute yourself, Elaine. Elaine Khan, unmute yourself. There you go.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, 2 points. The first with Eddie's name, I took it that as he grew up and matured and was starting to handle things, his name became more mature. The Eddie version was him as a little boy, and Edward is a more mature version of the name, a more formal name. And it also, to me, meant, from the author's point of view, that he was moving onward and upward. And it gave me hope while I was reading it that he was going to work out everything and be okay. So that was my take on the name thing. The other thing was a personal tragedy that happened to 3 young college children who grew up with my kids in New Jersey, were killed on the Lockerbie plane crash in, I think it was 1987. I think we all remember that. With the, it landed over Scotland. Everybody on the plane perished. So the mother of one of the boys, who happened to be my son's closest friend and my daughter's prom date when they were in high school, now they were all in college. She was an artist. The mother was an artist, a sculptor. And she contacted as many of the survivors, many of the people's wives and mothers. And she created a tremendous sculpture, life-size. And each character was one of the mothers or girlfriends or wives of one of the people that was killed on that plane crash. And it is now a huge installation. I believe it's somewhere on Long Island in one of the colleges there. It's called Dark Elegy. And you can see pictures of it online. But that was her way of coping with the loss of this golden child that she had. Handsome, smart, everything, but to just be blown to bits on a plane. There were a lot of college students on that plane returning home after first semester abroad. So anyway, that was the way that she coped with it and helped the other surviving women, parents, wives, etc., cope with it. And in each sculpture, she instilled something precious that they brought to her, and she put it in the sculpture. It was something precious for that person who they lost. So it's forever remembered inside the installation. I mean, it's a beautiful, it's called Dark Elegy for a reason, but yeah. It's an amazing tribute. So there's ways that people do connect and help each other heal.
And I think that spoke to, the power of ritual and memorial and, the need we have for these kinds of symbols of our grief. When he goes to the memorial there with the birds, and the description of it was very beautiful. I could visualize the birds flying. I think these symbols are very important and powerful in our lives, and they are part of the healing process. Yeah. Okay. We have other people.
Cheryl.
Yeah, Cheryl.
Hospital before. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are, Cheryl.
In the hospital, before he was released, the social worker or whoever said to them, John and whatever the Lacey, right, about his name. And it was Lacey who immediately said, because I guess somewhere she instinctively knew or saw already that he was in the news a lot. This is while he's still comatose or pretending to be whatever in the hospital. And she said Edward. She wanted that name, and because Eddie was too whatever she felt at the moment. So he didn't decide to change his name.
No,
he didn't know he was going to be Edward.
No.
And the other thing is, I think that, I know they talked to his psychiatrist. I don't know if they had help themselves. I certainly would have needed it, especially when you're childless and you've never raised a child. But they had all this grief themselves, and I think really a lot of it was punting. They didn't know what to do, but they were kind, and I think kindness goes a long way.
They were kind, and their instincts were pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Linda?
I want to thank everybody for their input, and I will say I did enjoy the letters, and I loved finding out that the woman who was pregnant and she was going to go see that man in LA who she had this odd relationship with was intending to ask her to marry him.
Right.
So I loved that. And the relationship that the brother had with that young woman, it obviously was something, because what was her name?
Hira, I think. Or
yeah. I mean, because she told Edward that she thought they were going to get married, didn't she?
Yeah, she did say that. But I mean, but don't teenagers sometimes think bad about that?
But still, it was more than just making out in the back of the store.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dina, go ahead.
Dina.
I'm trying to unmute.
You're unmuted.
When I forgot who it was, just spoke about Lacey and her husband. I think it was almost, here they were able to handle this traumatic situation, and they were never able to have their own child. It was like, they seemed to be so, Cheryl brought this up, they were so well suited to be parents, and they were deprived of the opportunity of having their own. And I think that was a real tragedy, having to turn their nursery over to take care of Edward. She instinctively knew what to do. They allowed him to sleep at Shay's house. I think the author just touched on so many different levels of emotion. And I think that's why the book has the rave reviews that it got.
Yeah, I think also she handled the relationship between John and Lacey quite sensitively and realistically. I mean, there was obviously tension in the relationship, that's clear, and it had a lot to do with them not being able to have a child. But that relationship also evolves and develops and ends with some reconciliation as they understand each other better and communicate. I mean, I think there are a lot of emphasis on communication and the value of the connection that comes from honestly communicating. There's that scene where Edward and John have the heart-to-heart about why he had hidden the letters from him. The real connections happen in this book when people share honestly with one another, which is true of life, right? Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment? I think maybe we've wrapped it up. It's been a great discussion as always. Wonderful to have you all here, and I hope you'll join us in 2 weeks for the Yellow House, and I hope you'll stick with it and give it a chance. I have some video of the author as well, which I think will enhance the discussion. And I've added to the list, you can see in September, the first Thursday in September, we've added the book by Talia Carner, The Third Daughter. Talia Carner is a Boca Raton author who's actually someplace else right now, but we've had her speak at the JCC before. She wrote a book called Jerusalem Maiden. She's a good writer and an excellent presenter. And she is going to join us for the book club on September 3rd via Zoom. So whenever I can do that, I try to do that. The other book that I added was Abby Stein's book, Becoming Eve, which is the story, the true story of an Orthodox rabbi, born a man who transitioned to a woman, transgender. And it's a true story, and she is a fascinating person, and I'm trying to get her to come and speak. I've emailed with her, but it hasn't happened yet. We'll see. But when I can, I try to get the author. If not, I'll have video for the author. And really, really appreciate all of you being here. See you later.
Before we leave, does Dina have something else to say?
Dina, your hands up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that on the author that's coming to speak on July 9th that you mentioned, who wrote The Two-Family House and Wartime Girls, I happened to hear her. She is really terrific. She's the most up person, and I'm sure she will make a phenomenal presentation to everybody.
Right, and she's being interviewed. That's going to be a discussion, a conversation with Linda Leugman. We won't be participating. It'll be an interview.
Well, she was wonderful when I heard her interview.
Yeah, she's very, very good. She's very good. All right, good. That's July 9th. If anyone needs a link for something you don't have, send me an email. You all have my email, but I'll repeat it. stephanieo@levisjcc.org. Thanks. See you all next time.
Wonderful.
Bye.